Greetings, class, and welcome back to Unit 2. In this particular lesson, we're going to talk about water. Water is a fascinating substance and one of the most important to all living things. In this particular section, we'll talk about the structure of water, some of its cool properties, and we'll finish out talking about acids and bases. One of the cool things about water is its shape itself. Water has this bent kind of structural shape, which I'll show you in a picture in a second ago, because it's covalent. But it's a special type of covalent. It's what we call a polar covalent compound. And it's a polar covalent compound because the electrons are not evenly shared between the hydrogens and the oxygens. This uneven sharing of the electrons creates a special type of attractions from one water molecule to another water molecule. And this special type of attraction, which is called a hydrogen bond, we're going to look at that more closely in a few moments, gives water many of its very cool properties. A couple very cool properties are on this slide here. Water is cohesive, which means it will bond to another water molecule. Like, for example, here, you see the droplets kind of connecting and sticking together and making bigger droplets. So cohesion is the property of one substance attracting to its own type of substance. Another cool property of water because of cohesion is this property called surface tension. Water molecules like to stick to each other, and that sticking to each other is pretty strong. So like, for example, this water strider here is not even heavy enough to break the bond between the water molecules and actually fall through the water. We looked at that in our Penny Lab. Water is also adhesive. Adhesion means water has the ability to stick to other things. Like, for example, the water moving up these vascular tissues in this plant, or the water sticking to the side of this graduated cylinder. Those are both examples of adhesion. So adhesion is a substance's ability to stick to something else. Capillary action, another very cool property of water. Water has the actual ability to move against the force of gravity, and it can move up. For capillary action to take place, both adhesion and cohesion need to occur. In these examples here, you can see the water molecules rising up the different tubes. The water is attracted to the sides of the tube, but it's also attracted to itself. And like in the plant, as the water molecules eventually evaporate out the top, it makes room, and the water will continue to move up because it's stuck to itself, and it's also stuck to the tube. Water will also dissociate, which means occasionally some molecules will actually separate into their component parts, like, for example, here, a hydrogen ion and a hydroxide ion. We're going to look more closely at that when we talk about acids and bases. Now, what causes all these other properties that we just mentioned, cohesion, adhesion, capillary action? It's the hydrogen bonds that the water forms. Now, we're talking about something different here than the covalent bond. There are two different bonds that take place in water. You have the covalent bond that holds the actual water molecule together. That's an example of a polar covalent bond, which I mentioned a few slides ago. A polar covalent bond is a type of covalent bond in which the electrons are not shared evenly. I'll show you on a picture coming up. Oxygen has a lot of electrons on one side, whereas hydrogen has just a few, a very small amount. So you actually have a buildup of charges where you have negative charges building up on one side and positive charges on another. Those oppositely charged ends or poles of the water molecules allows it to attract other water molecules. That attraction from one water molecule to another is called a hydrogen bond. They're pretty strong. They hold those water molecules together and give them those incredible properties that they have. Here's an example of what a polar covalent bond looks like. You can see here on the hydrogen side the buildup of slight positive charge, and on the oxygen side the buildup of the negative charge because of all the electrons. And look at water's very cool shape. Here's another great picture. You can actually see here the water molecule, the individual water molecule, the covalent bond that holds the hydrogen to the oxygens, creating that uneven distribution of electrons. But then you have the hydrogen bond. The hydrogen bond is what holds one water molecule to another water molecule. So you have two different things going on when we're talking about water. We have the covalent bond, which is polar, which creates the environment for the formation of the hydrogen bonds, which holds the water molecules together. And that's what gives water all those cool properties that we mentioned before. Water can form up to 4 additional molecule attractions at a time. So you can get 4 additional waters per molecule, as you can see in the diagram here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's another closer look at a water molecule. You can again see the hydrogen bonds here and here. That's what holds the water molecules together. And then the individual molecule is formed by the covalent bond. And this all works, again, because the water molecule is polar. So what? Like I said, this gives water a lot of cool properties. First of all, since it's pretty attracted to itself, it has a high heat capacity. It takes a lot of energy to change the temperature of water. So water's temperature will stay pretty consistent. Like, for example, in your pool, the temperature outside will change dramatically from during the course of the day to the evening, but the water of your pool will basically stay the temperature the whole day. So it has high heat capacity. It's cohesive, which again we said it sticks to itself. It's adhesive, which means it sticks to other stuff. It has a high surface tension. We looked at it in the Penny Lab. And it also has this very cool property called the density anomaly. Water is one of the only solids that when it becomes frozen is actually less dense than itself. Frozen water will actually sit on top of liquid water, which is very important in nature because it allows animals in water, like ponds, freshwater, lakes, things like that, the ability to survive in the wintertime. The frozen ice on top will freeze going from the top down and will sit on the top of the water, allowing the water below to stay liquid and trapping the heat inside so that the animals like the fish and stuff can survive the cold winter. Now, sometimes you have water and it doesn't want to attract to other things. For example, say oils. Why is that? It's not just simply that oil, for example, is less dense than water. It's because oil is a different type of compound. Water is a polar compound. Oil is a nonpolar compound. The problem with nonpolar compounds, and we looked at a couple of those yesterday, you may not have realized it in the diatomic molecules examples, nonpolar molecules have equal distribution of electrons. So they have no buildup of charges on one side or the other. Therefore, there's nothing for the water molecule to be attracted to. So you need a little help sometimes to get water to attract to materials that are nonpolar. That's where things like surfactants come in, like surfactant ban. Surfactants, or what are called surface active agents, allow polar molecules to attract to nonpolar molecules. And this was the bulk of what we did in our Penny Lab. So you did some research on that, and you looked up what a surfactant was, what an emulsifier was, and how they work to bring nonpolar and polar substances like water together. Because water is polar, it gives it some additional special properties that we haven't mentioned. And one of those is the ability to form incredible solutions. In fact, water is known as the universal solvent because of its ability to dissolve so many different types of materials. But what is a solution? A solution is just simply a well-mixed mixture. It's not a chemical attraction of substances, it's just multiple substances together in one place. They can be separated pretty easily, and they retain their own individual properties. But the difference with a solution is from other types of mixtures is that it's very well mixed. So it does look like a pure substance, although it's not. In solutions, you have 2 different materials. You have the solvent, that's the material that's doing the dissolving, and generally in the greater amount. And then you have the solute, which is what you're adding. That's what's being dissolved in. A great example would be chocolate milk. Milk would be the solvent, whereas the chocolate powder would be the solute. Now, when you create solutions, there are actually 3 different types. You have dilute solutions. Dilute solutions are those solutions that have a very small amount of solute in relation to a large amount of solvent. Then you have concentrated solutions. Concentrated solutions have a large amount of solute dissolved into a small amount of solvent. And then the third type of solution is a saturated solution. Saturated solutions are solutions that have the maximum amount of solute that they can possibly hold at that particular temperature. Meaning if you added any more solute to the solvent, it wouldn't dissolve and settle to the bottom. Now here's a couple of examples to compare. I have on the left side what's called a suspension. That's this guy right here. And on the right side, I have a solution. Look how different they look. Suspensions are what are called heterogeneous mixtures. A heterogeneous mixture is a mixture in which the materials are not evenly distributed. And you can see that pretty clearly. Look at the bottom there, all that gunk. And then look at the top, quite a bit lighter. Okay, suspensions are those kind of things like, for example, salad dressing, like maybe, let's see, Italian dressing or you have to shake that because those particles are so heavy, they don't stay dissolved within the solution and they actually sink to the bottom. Whereas look at a solution. The solution is a homogeneous mixture, which means the particles are evenly distributed throughout. So if you look at that closely, it looks the same at the top as the bottom. They're both examples of mixtures, but they're different types. Now, a special type of solution that water can form is an acid and a base. As we mentioned before, water can break up. And some molecules do from time to time. They break up into hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. Any type of substance that adds hydrogen ions in solution is called an acid. Anything that adds hydroxide ions is called a base. When we're talking about acids and bases, we use a special tool called the pH scale to measure the strength of the acids and the bases. The pH scale runs from 0 to 14, with 7 in the middle being neutral. We'll look at it more closely in a slide coming up. Acids are substances that have properties including corrosiveness, sour taste, and they turn litmus paper red. Bases, on the other hand, are bitter tasting, slippery to contact, and they turn they turn red litmus paper blue. Here's an example of the pH scale here. As you can see, neutral in the middle, 0 on the outside, and 14 on the other side. Okay, the further away you get from neutral, the stronger the acid or the base becomes. And as you can see here, they indicated one of the properties I mentioned last slide. The acid side, of course, red because it turns blue litmus paper red, and the base side blue because it turns red litmus paper blue. Okay. And again, acids, anything that forms hydrogen ions when dissolved. Base is anything that form hydroxide ions. The greater the amount of hydrogen ions in the solution, the stronger the acid. The greater amount of hydroxide ions in the solution, the stronger the base. Okay. And the further you move away from 7, again, neutral, the stronger they get. So the lower the number, the stronger the acid. The higher the number above 7, the stronger the base. And in your body, you have different types of compounds called buffers. Buffers are important because they prevent dramatic changes in pH, which can affect homeostasis. The pH scale, as you can see this tool right here, the pH stands for potential for hydrogen, because that's what we're talking about, the presence of the hydrogen ions. When we meet again next time, we'll start talking about those compounds which are so important for living things, the classes of organisms we call macromolecules, and then finish up talking about enzymes.